All right, so the fifth week. This week we're going to talk about credit cards, or well, credit in general. Credit cards are part of it. Credit cards are kind of the darker side of it. I mean, credit cards can be used wisely. In fact, I'm just going to say you need to learn how to use them wisely because they can be kind of an asset to you if you know how to do it properly. But they can be just incredibly damaging and harmful to your personal, wealth if you can't quite figure it out. It makes life much easier, but so you have to, figure out a way to become a disciplined user of credit cards to take advantage of some of the perks and just for the convenience and just the way things work. Also, as we things evolve towards digital currencies and digital, central digital currencies and less reliance on cash. One of the reasons, if you're not good with say, a credit card, you're not going to be good with, electronic other forms of money as well because you don't have that connection. That's, I've mentioned before, me as a trying to sell something, I'm all about credit cards because people don't have that direct connection. They're very, when you give somebody $100, it takes a little something from you. If it's on a credit card, you separate that psychological barrier, and people are apt to give you $200 and $300, whatever. And so, for me, I sold a lot more equipment, and we're talking in the thousands when people are using credit cards over cash, which doesn't make any sense. But hey, I'm not the one to argue. So anyway. We're going to talk about first how to get credit. And again, now I'm talking in the broader sense of credit in terms of, buying a home, even qualifying for a car, something like that. There are different rates that are charged to different people. There's nothing, it's fair from a financial perspective, but the people that have the preponderance, the capability, to pay back and represent the least risk to the lender are going to get a better rate. So again, the rich get richer. The poor folks, they're going to get clobbered. They're going to get the highest rate with the most fees and everything else. The rich don't put up with it. And that's how they got rich and stay rich. So anyway, background on credit. Credit's provided by a creditor, be repaid at some point in the future. So different types. There's certain credit that's tied to a particular item, some sort of collateral, some sort of security that, an easy example is a home or a car. The reason why car loans are fairly inexpensive is because the mechanism to repossess cars is pretty efficient. They can just come and take it. The laws benefit them. Same thing with a home. Don't pay the mortgage and they'll foreclose on you and they'll get the home back. I mean, there's going to be some charges, but it's not like you going out and using a credit card and blowing a bunch of, money at Target or Walmart or wherever you choose to shop. They can't really go back and, nor do they want to, dig through and try and reclaim some of that stuff. So the interest rate's going to be higher. So, but anyway, non-installment credit is, usually stuff that's, for a department store, something like that, where there's not a fixed rate. Whereas installment credit, there's typically, you're buying the car, you know what the interest rate is the payments are what they are. They're not going to change. You can't say, well, I want to pay $10 this month. I'm going to pay $100. No, you pay what the payment is, or you're outside of the realm. Obviously, you can usually pay more if you want, but on a lot of things that doesn't necessarily work. And then open-end credit, like a line of credit type thing, can be useful. But anyway, advantage of using credit helps build a good credit score. Yeah, I mean, the point of the good credit score, it's not a goal in its own, but it is that ability to get the best rate when you need to borrow money, and the easiest way to borrow money. Eliminates the need for carrying cash, writing checks. Yeah, like I say, I think checks are probably going to be phased out more and more. You just don't see them as frequently. And I like it because I just don't have to carry money around. And so obviously if you're, can just tap your card or do whatever, it does make it quite convenient. And also, I do think there's some positive things in terms of the record keeping. When you spend all your cash, you kind of go back in your head and figure out where it went. But if it's a credit card, there's a record, and you can keep track of it. Disadvantages. So the excessive spending, and that's on you. I mean, you need to be able to control it. But anyway, enough said. Large accumulation of debt. Yep. We know how compound interest works, and we know how accumulation of debt would work. It works perfectly fine, except the interest rates are much higher. They just get to the point where you can't pay anymore, and then you default. So it's not like you're going to have 65 years of credit card debt. No, you'll be broke way before that if you just do the minimum payment. Credit rights. So all kinds of different laws. These guys cite stuff back in 2010. But yeah, people are always going to say, yeah, I was wrong. I got screwed, whatever. But it does help in terms of if you buy something or, have something or have some unfair practice, you, again, have more recourse than you would if you had cash. And there are some predatory practices out there, but again, it takes two to get involved in that. The credit bureaus. We're going to discuss credit bureaus in a bit. So background on credit. Yep. You could get by in a non-credit world, but it's going to diminish your lifestyle, and it's going to make things more expensive. There's a lot of deals. Again, I always kind of cite traveling, but other things that if you don't use a credit card, you can't get a good deal. In fact, if you, I've been at the rental car counters and seen somebody try to rent a car with cash, and it's painful. And, they're looked at as defective, degenerate, the whatever, because they're normal people have credit cards, is the way society views it. And if you don't, yeah, anyway, so a lot of prices are going to be more expensive. Obviously, the credit card companies do make money, but they make that money off the vendor. So that's another thing, and one reason I don't use credit cards at certain places. They'll call it a convenience fee, they'll call it a whatever fee, but basically it's the merchant trying to reclaim that 3% or whatever that he's having to pay to the credit card company. I don't like to pay that. In fact, if I've had friends who say, I'll just put it on my card, or I can get you cash next week. I will gladly take cash next week. If somebody's spending a couple $3,000, we're talking $100. I want my $100. So, anyway, credit history. Yep, pay your bills on time. Now, again, the credit card system is not going to highlight somebody who just has a single payment. But, that stuff doesn't generally get reported. But they are going to start to ding you and charge you a little bit more here and there. Credit insurance. So what happens here is, again, it's kind of a spin, kind of a gaslighting thing, whatever, where they'll say, hey, we're just such great people. We're going to give you credit insurance. It could be for your credit card, could be for your mortgage, could be for a lot of things. But, hey, if you happen to die or something like that, your credit card's paid off in full, or your mortgage is paid off in full, which is great. Makes things much easier for you, but it also makes things much easier for them. And oh, by the way, that insurance, somebody's paying for it, and it's you. It may not be, stated directly in terms of a charge, but yeah, there's the cost of that is not borne by the credit card company or the mortgage company. It's usually reflected in your payments. In fact, I think on mortgages, a lot of times is stated directly. So credit bureaus. So these guys are public agencies. Well, I don't even know if agencies are right. Firms, corporations. And what they do is they collect data and they sell it. They provide a service to to the lenders. If a lender, before they're going to loan out any money, they're going to go to the credit bureau and see what your credit history is. And so they generate, credit reports. They have different types of reports, but when we talk about this later, we'll talk about getting a credit report, and you can see who's made inquiries into your credit. And often there's a correlation between that and all the junk mail you get. If you've got Citibank or somebody, looking into your credit, and that's posted in your credit report, that's probably because they're trying to assess your credit worthiness to decide whether to send you a credit card offer or not. So there's 3 bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And they've been around for a long time. They're definitely the big boys. They say they gather their data independently and they're, interchangeable, but one credit bureau may have different information than the other, just depending on what their sources are. There's also a thing about getting a free credit report annually. So, again, the government decided this was a good idea. Well, these private agencies, they're not necessarily on board with this. I mean, they're forced into it. So they're going to try to make these credit reports, getting them, maybe a little bit more difficult, or at least maybe try to get you to sign up for a subscription or something else. Now, there's nothing in a credit report that tells you your credit score, and for some reason people want to know their credit score. I mean, I guess it's a useful number, but that's proprietary information, and so the credit card company is going to sell that to you if possible. So if you just search, free credit report, freecreditreport.com, whatever you do, you're going to get a free trial most of the time, and you have to put down a credit card in order to get that that service available to you. And I'll show you the way you can actually do it through the government site, and it gives you what the credit reports grudgingly want to give you. And actually, it's the report you get through the site that they're forced to give you is actually more useful than just your arbitrary credit score. It goes back and it tells you kind of what your credit score is based upon in terms of the different lenders that are out there and what their opinion is of you. Do you have any lates? Do you have any unusual stuff? And so you need to check that credit report to make sure that your information is matched against you. I mean, I can barely get into the sites. I've been divorced, almost 15 years now. And I know the questions they're going to ask me to get into the site, and it's usually addresses that are associated with my ex-wife. I've never, ever lived there. But for some reason, they still have the data all jumbled up. So I know they aren't really good at this. They're not great at keeping people's information correct. So anyway, you do want to get in there. And the fact that they're annually, and there's 3 of them, means that you could actually get this 3 times a year because they're all independent. So you can legitimately request a credit report from each different company once a year. Or if you happen to go to a store and they say, yeah, no, you're not approved, you can demand a report right then because, it's probably based upon bad information. But anyway, you have a legal right to get a free credit report right then. So lots of reasons to get credit reports. Yep. All kinds of information. I mean, the reason why they make it kind of difficult to access your credit report is because it's the holy grail. It's got all of your information. Social Security, all the addresses, phone numbers, a lot of stuff that would be incredibly valuable for, some sort of identity hack. And tax liens. Some of that stuff won't actually be on there. Not that it's not germane, but it's like people think, oh, I had a bankruptcy, so all that information was wiped from my credit report. Well, these people are not stupid. If say, MasterCard or somebody's thinking about giving you a credit card and they look at your credit report and it's all blank, that's not normal. That means that you know, your debts have all been wiped out or discharged or what have you through a bankruptcy. So sometimes no information means either you haven't used much credit, but there's ways they can tell when you've had a bankruptcy. Don't worry. Accounts turned over to collection agencies. So collection agencies, the way they work, this will definitely affect your credit report, credit bureau. This information gets to them. What happens is, let's say, you know, the Gap, Target, somebody has a credit, or even if they do the store credit cards, but let's say you had a store credit card with them and you didn't pay and you owe them like $1,000. And so they'll hound you to a certain extent, but that's not really their business, you know, their core competency. So what they'll do is, you know, somebody in whatever department will make a decision to sell your debt off to a collection agency. So maybe they'll sell it for $100 or $50 or something, because most people who owe money, they're kind of deadbeats and they're probably not going to pay it back. And so that collection agency, they have the right, they bought the ability, that debt, to go after you for the full $1,000, but they only paid, you know, $50 or $100 for it. So they're like, you know, Dog the Bounty Hunter. They're incentivized to try to get that money from you because there's a lot of profit in it for them if they do. So that's what collection agencies. So they're going to be quite aggressive, and they're going to use all kinds of different means, and they're entitled to that debt because it's been signed over to them. So they can legitimately, legally do all that. Okay, open and closed accounts. Yep, you'll see all that on there. And so this is kind of a good thing when you look on there and you see page after page and go, oh, I never use that one. I haven't. I should close that. Yeah, you should. So a good way to find out what is open is to get on there and do it. And then list of companies that have requested your credit report. So this is what I'm talking about with the junk mail, where you'll see, you know, who's been looking at your credit. And if you requested to take a loan someplace, that might have a bearing. But keep in mind too, if you're trying to get a loan and you go to several places kind of shopping around, like let's say you're going to look for a car and they want to, you know, make it sound like you're more committed and keep you in the dealership. And so what they'll do is they'll say, oh, let's run your credit. Let's see what your payments are, and we'll do all this stuff. And they'll run your credit. If they do that, you know, they're not charging you for it, but you could watch your credit score literally go down through the course of the day, because you now represent a bigger risk to you know, a lender, because you're give the appearance that you're trying to get loans all over town. I actually had a mortgage with bought a couple mortgages, but I was trying to get a loan for a tractor, and I was really shopping around and seeing what the best rates were, and finally I got a call from the mortgage company saying, hey, it looks like you're struggling a little bit. You know, would you like a loan from us? You know, we might. They wanted to make sure that if I was going to get another loan, that, you know, it was through them, so that they could keep track of me, because they're concerned that you know, I might put their mortgage at risk by running up a bunch of debt in other places. So anyway, credit scores will go down if you do that a bunch. Here's a report. So you get a printed report, you know, or obviously you're going to download electronically, but all the different stuff with your addresses, if you had a bankruptcy, collections. Yeah, this person's not going to have a good score. They got a lot of stuff going on here. Most of your accounts, normally I've never seen balances on them, but you'll see just a lot of nothing to report kind of data, which is what you want. Kind of the best you can hope for. Credit score itself, again, some people are really wrapped up with this, or, you know, they get email alerts that, oh, your credit score has changed. And I literally don't care, because I'm not out trying to negotiate a new loan right now. But as long as you've got a good credit score, you just want to make sure that you're getting the best credit rate available. And if you're going to someplace and say, oh, we'll finance anybody, that's not a place for you. what's going to happen is a company, a business that will finance anybody is taking in, people who are known risks. And so their rates are probably going to be higher, and they've got to factor in these losses, in through their business. And so, no, you want a, to get a loan from somebody who just won't loan money to anybody. So, what goes into your score? Yeah, paying your bills on time. You do have to use the credit. If you don't ever have any credit, if you don't have a mortgage or a cell phone bill or the rest of that, that's going to appear a little odd, and it's going to knock your score down a little bit. New credit. So if you're out trying to shop around and get a whole bunch of new credit, that's going to decrease things. And different types of credit. So again, they can use whatever criteria they want. They own these scores, so you can't really object, because it's their algorithms that generate it. You can have different credit scores across the different credit bureaus. The FICO score. 350 that's not good. Anyway, it's not hard to get 700-800, and that's good enough. And then you don't worry about it. Correcting the credit score, so they have 30 days, to fix things if you find an error in there. So you need to review it to figure out what exactly is going on. Improving your credit score. Just general personal finance things. The one big thing here, though, is communication. If you think, I'll just ignore these people and they'll go away. Oh, no, they won't. All right, so reviewing your credit score. So they're saying to do it twice a year. That's probably a good rule of thumb. Make sure it's accurate, obviously. And, just look at general information and see what might be changing things. You also, if you're looking at purchasing something, especially a home, and you're going to talk to your lender, way before you go to purchase a home, you should go to the lender, and we'll talk more about this later, but you need to get pre-qualified for a loan to figure out, what you can afford and just general knowledge. I mean, the biggest part of buying a new home is figuring out what your financing is going to be. And being kind of ready to strike. Right now, it's probably not a good time to be buying a home due to the rates being high. But the time to have everything kind of lined up, or figure out how much money you can borrow, or have them kind of look at your credit. They'll generally, you'll have to pay for a credit report, which is about $50. They're going to order it from the one of the credit bureaus, and since that's not one of the free reports, they're going to charge you for it. And so anyway, that cost gets passed on to you. If you go through and buy a house later, you're going to have to pay for that cost anyway. But anyway, the lender, I've just had exceptional mortgage bankers, but they'll go, oh yeah, this is going to be a red flag, or this is about right, or you need this much for a down payment. So you can get a lot more knowledge from those guys than I can necessarily pass on, because they're in that day after day. Okay, so here's the credit scores. I would say almost 50% of the people have a 700 or better. Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry. More than 50% have a 700 or better. So if you start getting down in these ranges, it's going to cost you. Your loans are going to be more expensive, if not even, they might be unattainable. So you just need to do what's necessary to get up into this range, and then nothing more, really. I mean, there's no reason to obsess about your credit score. I think people spend a lot of time on that. FTC.gov, Credit Karma. Yes, again, this whole thing with Intuit and TurboTax, it's a love-hate thing. These people they're fairly evil. I mean, the people complain about how complex the tax system is. Well, there's a reason it's pretty complex, and believe me, it's the people selling the software that help you figure it out that want to keep it complex. So it's a bit of a industry that's developed. Not a bit; it's a huge industry, and so they do lobby to keep the current system in place because it pays quite well. So you can go down the rabbit hole if you want and do some research, but you'll see that there's quite a few reports that have been written, and the numbers bear it out. The numbers that a lot of these people who help you with your credit that they lobby, it's pretty impressive. So this FTC.gov, this is just going to take you to a .gov site rather than a .com site. So you're not going to do much here. I mean, they have their little pet projects they want you to get interested, but what you're looking for is the free credit report. And why you're going this way as opposed to just going on Google is because if you go to Google, it's going to be very confusing because they're going to try and sell you stuff. They'll say free, and they'll say, "Oh, of course, you don't want the truly free one because that won't give you your credit score, and you want this other one, and we'll give you free for 30 days because you're going to remember to cancel," knowing full well that most people don't. So anyway, they'll have a little bit more info on here, and then they'll give you the data to actually get to the site. Now again, you're stepping away from the government site, and so you're just going to a direct one. And who's it brought to you by? Our pals, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. So you're going to request your free credit report, fill out the form, pick the report you want. So you can pick any one of these three, and then a couple months from now you can pick another one, and then do it. So keep in mind, you're just coming on this thing fresh, so you basically got to set up an account, and then they're going to ask you all these, in-depth questions to correctly identify you. But believe me, the info that they have is not impressive because, like I say, most of my info that they have on me is erroneous. So that's how you get the credit report. Identity theft, we know what that's about. So, and this is just, it's to a whole new level. These guys are kind of focused on the old school, dumpster dive, and are going through your mailboxes. Most of it now is electronic, phishing, doing other stuff. So, I've never lost any money in identity theft, but man, have I been hit a bunch of times. But I've been able to get, the refunds back or get it stopped. And it all has to do with kind of being on top of it. If you let time expire, if you let it go on for a month or so, it can be quite difficult. I actually had one that it went like 7 or 9 months, and it took a long time to get that money back. What somebody had done, somebody in Florida had used a savings account that I had. I don't use savings accounts, not with banks. And anyway, I had an old dormant one, and they were paying their cable bill by using some ACH credit, automated clearinghouse debit against my savings account, which I didn't even know you could do. But anyway, the only way I caught it was I noticed a credit card on there that I had for overdraft protection. Again, a card I don't really use other than for overdraft. And it started to have a balance. And so finally I called up the bank, and, it had gone on for, like I say, about 7 or 9 months. And so they're like, well, you didn't report it to us quick enough, so it's not on us. I'm like, oh, yes, it is. So anyway, we went round and round, and yeah, sure enough, they did end up covering it. So you have to be pretty vigilant and maybe just close some of those idle accounts. So, but I do know people who lost a lot. Again, they just got some random stats in here, but I was driving down the Glen one day, and I got a text saying my $5,000 transfer from my Wells Fargo checking account to my Wells Fargo credit card had been denied. I don't do business with Wells Fargo. I'm like, all of this is new to me. So you can imagine how it worked out calling Wells Fargo and telling them about this problem. The first thing they want to know is my account number. I'm like, I don't have an account. Well, then how do you, and so I had to go there in person. It was during COVID. It was a complete cluster, but got it done. So, again, these guys are kind of old school. You don't see as much of this going on. Most people do, paperless billing, or the bills themselves don't have a bunch of information on them. Skimming, now we're getting a little more high tech. Yep. I've had it just happen, restaurant in Eagle River, they go to run your credit card for your, food or whatever, and oh, by the way, they maybe whatever, while they have access to your card, they'll run it on another thing, and anyway, it can get pretty screwed up. In fact, mine ended up by many rounds of drinks at one of the Odd Man Rush down there. I went there and said, look, this wasn't me. Well, sorry, but the guy had your card. Well, did he sign for it? Whatever. So they were in the wrong. Merchants are very lax about requiring a signature, matching they just don't do it. It's just they just write it off as a cost of doing business. But Odd Man Rush, they didn't want to do that, but I got nothing, I'm not buying other folks $50 worth of beer for people I don't even know. So anyway, it came back to me, but yeah, I think they got a bit of an education as well. Pre-texting, and yep. Alaska USA, and I guess it's now Global Credit Union. I barely have an account with those people, and they've got in terms of volume of phishing attempts, it's insane. So fishing, we know. Farming, yep, larger audience. Legitimate access to record, crime rings. It is done by crime rings. So violating your mailbox, not as useful anymore. I have had stuff stolen on my mailbox, passports and things like that, but that's been a few years back. But that's kind of a danger when you live in rural areas and you have mailboxes just out there on the side of the highway. Shielding, so yeah, again, they're kind of an old school stuff. I don't write that many checks. I don't have that much documents. Anyway, these people, I'll tell you one thing. When I was in the military, when I first got in the military, they said all of your personal items of any value need to be identified with, you need to engrave your ID number on them, which was your social security number. So now when some, guy steals my stereo, not only does he have my stereo, but he's got my social security number. That was a complete backfire on their part, but live and learn. Their heart was in the right place. Secure sites, obviously. We know all this. If you, it's too late in life if this is the first you're learning of this. I mean, we all get hit quite a bit. I will show you some things though with the. It's kind of funny, the skimming that takes place with the ATMs is, especially in Europe, man, they really develop that stuff, and so we'll look at some examples. Computers from hackers, yep. So again, social security numbers used to be on everything, and not so much anymore. Social security's private information, so don't see as much as they used to. Identity theft insurance. I've had this a number of times after there's been a hack, and then they'll say, oh, we're going to offer you this free. No. Usually doesn't work. Usually they notify me a week or two after I've noticed it myself. So immediate action is always a good thing. The timeliness part, if you see your credit card balance ringing up, or Or if you go on a road trip, let's say in the lower 48, and you're really making good time, the you'll trigger the algorithm. The credit card people say, "Wow, this credit card is being used in multiple states in rapid succession. We've got a problem." And they may send you a text at first saying, are these charges yours? And if you hit yes, that's fine. If you hit no, you just killed that credit card. So be careful what you do. Maybe buy that, final bag of Cheetos and some fuel before you. Well, they probably already banned it at that point. It used to be where you would want to tell these folks that you're traveling, but now they kind of track you as well through phones or whatever, so they kind of know when you're on the road, and as long as your phone and your credit card in the same place, they seem fairly content. Anyway, yeah, all the government agencies you could speak to, the big thing is you want to get it shut down, or at least put those people on notice so you're not on the hook for all these charges later on. So Equifax, I don't know that you want to reach out to these people personally, but if you did, Experian, same thing, Experian, and TransUnion. Let's take a little break here and look at a link. This is kind of funny. This is may get this video banned from YouTube, so if it happens, I'll have to repost it again. But this was part of a British TV show, and what they were showing.
Mark Connor and his team believe the
this goes pretty quick.
Including this man, have rigged a secret camera onto a cash machine.
So the guy on his left, his eyes are absolutely.
Well, pickpocketing's gone high tech with the skimming, or cloning as we call it. It's quite an easy system now for the pickpockets and the other grafters, should I say, to use a camera just to clock the number, high tech, and once they've got the card, then it'll be cloned.
Suddenly, the suspects are on the move. Two members of the DIP team are positioned at the station exit. The DIP team head for the platform and get their hands on the suspects just in time. It turns out the cash point has been fitted with a skimmer, a hidden device that acts as a card reader.
I think this is funny that they have to wait for the guy to finish for the crime to.
So inside that is all the details, all the coordinates to read people's card details and tablet numbers. As you put the card in, all your details are recorded in chips there.
And there's also a secret camera.
If you look there, it's a pinhole camera that films people put their PIN numbers in.
Skimmers allow criminals to harvest all the data required to clone bank cards and clean out the customer's bank accounts.
Give the guy a surprise.
So it's pretty interesting what can be done. You can go on whatever. I don't want to be cliche, but the dark web, and you can buy all those skimmers and obviously the pinhole cameras. But the level they've got it to where it not only gets that information, but it ships it off to whoever, almost instantaneously. So by the time you get to the next ATM, they've already, hit your daily limit. When I was in Spain, they'd have ATMs that were not ATMs at all. They only had a screen that said no funciona, basically does not work. So first you shove your card in there, and then it just comes out with that out of order signal, and you put the card in, you type your PIN, and then it says it's out of order, and you go, oh, this machine's no good, I'll go to the next one. Well, all that machine was a skimmer, and they just put it on the side of the building. So these guys are actually getting even lazier. They're putting it right on an existing ATM and making them do the work. So identity theft is real. We can't really talk about all the different identity thefts because it's It's constantly changing. It's, you know, it's like a virus or whatever, where they adapt and they change and they come up with the next technology. So, managing your credit. So, credit cards. Again, I've try to hit on some of the advantages and disadvantages. I'm going to put a video out there that I'll put it out there for comment, but it's pretty harsh. It talks about the origin of credit cards and just what a change it's made. I mean, in some ways it's an improvement, but that's only incidental. I mean, the real goal is to make money from you as a consumer, and so that's why you have to be so diligent. But anyway, we've talked about this. You know, be a convenience user, just pay it in full each month, and don't give in to these other illusions. So yeah, we know how compound interest works. Applying for a credit card, quite easy. You know, usually they'll have you type in your Social Security, which then they'll go ahead and pay for the credit report, and they typically want your salary too, just so they can, you know, if you happen to be out of work and you did admit it, they can, you know, if this whole thing explodes, you know, 6 months later, and you applied for a credit card when you didn't have a job and you lied about your income, they might have some recourse. I don't know, but they seem to always want to know your annual income. Other things they look at, yep, current economic conditions too. Credit card debt is forever rising. I mean, and a lot of times it's not necessarily due to a discipline thing with people. It's just people are stressed. Wages are low, expenses are high. I mean, it's just the way it goes. MasterCard, Visa, American Express. So these two are, you know, credit cards that we would normally contend with. If you've ever had an American Express card, it's not exactly the same. There are some American Express cards that act like a traditional one, but these guys are more like a diners club where it has to be paid in full at the end of the month. There is no grace period or you know, you can't just say, oh, okay, I'm going to pay some interest on it. There's going to be more fees involved, and that's just not how they're set up. Proprietary cards, not as, you know, I remember my father had all kinds of gas station cards when I was growing up, and retail stores, and there are still certain stores like, I guess, Kohl's or whatever. If you're not using their particular credit card, it might be a bit more expensive for you, but for the most part, people have gone with more general cards rather than a different card for every gas station. Credit limit, overdraft protection, annual fees. So a lot of cards don't have an annual fee, which is good. But if they do have an annual fee, they better be giving you something in return for that. And most cards are set up to either give you a lot of perks or maybe cash back and no fees or something like that. So the ones that have the best miles and all that kind of stuff are typically the ones that have maybe the higher interest, which doesn't matter if you're just going to pay off the bill. So there you go. Anyway, but don't get wrapped up. You know, people who are impressed by your black card or gold card or platinum card, they're probably not the people that you want to impress anyway. It's pretty shallow. Grace period, that's that time when you're not paying any interest. And the interest rates, yes. Now, if you're getting a cash advance, there is no grace period. You're paying a fee and interest from the first day. Pardon me. Finance charge. So, one thing when you're looking at your bill is you look to make sure all the charges are valid, and then look at the finance charge and make sure it's zero. If not, you know, figure out what happened, why it's not zero. The method they use may change depending on the credit card you have. All right. So when we're talking about repaying credit cards or loans or any of that, there's different ways, like we said, it could be calculated. Simple interest rate is not common. That's not a compounding rate. So anyway, there can be teaser rates or different rates, and it just gets very confusing. So the government has come up with a kind of a standardized rating, APR, annual percentage rate. That means, a certain thing, the simple interest rate, including any fees. So for comparison, you can look at APR, and based upon whatever method they're using, any comparisons that need to be made from a legal basis will be done in APR, and so that way you're comparing kind of apples to apples. So anyway, the term APR is quite common. Just means annual percentage rate, and it means whatever method you're using, we want you to convert it to a simple interest rate, including any fees charged. So those hidden fees have to be, calculating the interest rate so that they don't give you some false rate. Impact of the interest rate can be huge, The credit cards, that's like if you're trying to invest and you've still got credit card debt, there's no way, outside of certain cycles with Bitcoin or something, where you're going to be making more on investments than you are in the market. And again, I wouldn't call those phases of Bitcoin investment. That's more of a speculation. That's such a high interest rate when it happens. Anyway, and then the length of time is obviously a factor. So we know how this works. We know how compound interest works. And we know how the rate will change things greatly. So we're seeing that in home mortgages, where it's just making things unaffordable for a lot of folks. Keep in mind, though, the one-time element, when you get a mortgage, for example, and they present all the documents and they show how much interest you'll pay over the course of the loan, it's going to be a shocker, and you may be tempted to walk away. But then you think that this interest is paid over 30 years, and inflation is going to act upon that, so even the money being paid back is not as valuable as it once was. Credit card statements. So, yeah. Again, you don't necessarily have to wait for that statement. You want to be looking at things mid-month and during the month to see how things are going, to see if there is any identity theft or any of that stuff going on, false charges. But definitely, scan through it, make sure everything looks familiar, make sure that you weren't erroneously charged a finance charge or maybe charged for a late payment. A lot of times late payments, if you only do it, say, once a year, you can usually, even if you are genuinely late, they'll usually waive it, but you have to reach out and kind of contact them. I know a lot of people hate making phone calls, but I'll do it in a heartbeat because it'll save you $35 or whatever. Now, you can't try that trick every time, but I do know even our own bookstore did it that way, where they'll sign up with some service that's, say, maybe on on Pacific Standard Time or someplace else, and they'll say, your payment is due by the 18th, and you're like, I got to get that in by midnight. You do it midnight Alaska, and they hit you with a late payment saying it came after midnight, because based upon the time zone that they live in. So you need to double check that. Not that you wait till the last day to pay it, but whatever. You want to definitely max perform your checking account, though. You don't want a bunch of idle cash sitting in there, so scrutinizing is not a bad thing. Scrutinize. Word of the day. Pay correct charges, customer service, or text, or whatever. It's a challenge, especially post-COVID or AI times, trying to get a real person. But most of the time it's worth it. And if you really want to shock them, write a letter, because that's where their system just crumbles, because they're not used to that. They want to, worst case, they want to get an email from you. Phone, they can just ignore you. But a letter, it's I don't know, it has a lot more weight than it used to, because they just don't see it that often. Different acts. There's been subsequent acts, but Anyway, most things with credit cards are, there's been some abuses on their parts, and so there's quite a few rules. And that's generally why I prefer using a credit card over a debit card, because the rules are enshrined in law. Other acts, yep. Restrictions on card holders. They're younger than 21. Tips on using a credit card. Reduce credit limit when economy weakens. Yeah, if you only knew that was happening. Pay credit card bills before investing money, definitely. Pay off credit card debt before other debt, because the interest rate is typically double, triple than that. Avoid credit repair services. Yeah, so if you think that you're going to be able to call somebody and they're going to, we're going to erase all this credit card debt for you. No, they're probably just going to add another debt on there for you and probably, piss off the credit card companies. The credit card companies, believe it or not, have their own credit repair services, within their companies, credit counseling type things, because they want their money. They know that a certain number of people are going to declare bankruptcy, and they're not going to win out on that one, nor you. But anyway, they would prefer to work with you and try and get this done. They perhaps, if you're on a credit card bill at 20-some% interest, they might be able to say, okay, you owe us, 10, 20 grand. Let's put this in a different type of loan with a lower interest rate, with fixed installments that you can, turn it back into a normal loan without that high interest rate. And they're happy because now they're getting consistent payments. They may, get rid of your credit card, restrict your credit card, but this is a better way of doing it. And especially if you go to bankruptcy, if you do go to that level, and you have to go in front of the judge or the court and explain how you got in this situation, and if you didn't do everything possible to avoid it, so, if you could say, well, I worked with the credit card things, and we tried this and we tried that, and, you make a good faith effort. But if you just show up in bankruptcy court expecting all these creditors to just take it because you no longer want to pay, it doesn't necessarily work out for you. We'll talk more about bankruptcy later on. So anyway, self-imposed limits on credit. Again, when I say use credit cards to make your life a bit easier, I don't mean use them differently than you would cash. I'm saying, anyway, it gets back to what's going to work for you. And if you can get in a mindset where putting money on a credit card is like spending money in cash, then you're in a much better place. Tips on using credit cards. Yeah, spend as little as possible. Consider ways to increase. So things have gone wrong, and now you're going to start borrowing for your friends. Debt consolidation loan. Now, you might be able to do that through the credit card counseling thing. Sell assets for cash. These are very, short-term problems. The real issue is this everyday expenses. You need to learn how to live within your means. And early on, before all these bad things happen, you have to start borrowing money from folks and working extra hours and driving Ubers in the middle of the night. No. Okay, so bankruptcy. There's two different ways. The Chapter 7, the discharge, which means, I guess it's kind of a erasure of debts, synonymous with that, but surrender assets to pay the debts. So you basically go to the court and you say, yeah, I'm really not good with money. I'm not very responsible, and so it's that embarrassing. And you give them a list of what you have, and they kind of give you an allowance back, and it's just not a great situation. And they may say, well, you may say, but I really like my car. Please don't take that. Well, no, you probably don't need that car. You can get by with something less. And so you give up quite a bit of your freedom, and plus you trash your credit rating for a long time. So it's not a great situation. Now, they are going to be probably more understanding because a lot of people, good people who end up in these situations typically have some sort of medical bills that are, and the court recognizes that, yeah, that's not a great situation we've got going here in terms of medical. So there are a lot of bankruptcies that result from medical situations. But if it's just pure consumer overspending, not going to be quite as understanding. The other thing is you may walk in there and say, look, I want to, walk away from all these debts. And the judge may say, well, wait a minute. You've got a job. You can pay these people back. We're not going to let you just skip out. We're going to give you some sort of Chapter 13, some sort of wage earner plan. And you're going to give these people their money back, and you're going to live in some sort of, diminished state, but you have the ability to pay this back. I saw this where down in Florida, I was investing in property, but I didn't go as big as these people did. And they bought a penthouse. Two doctors from the Atlanta area bought a big penthouse for $1.2 million, which was a lot of money at the time, and 2007-ish time frame. And they just walked away from it and said, yeah, we don't, we're not paying that, and tried to do bankruptcy. And they're like, oh, nope, you can work. You've got income. You're paying this. So you give up a lot of control. So again, consider it like cash. It's not a, you don't have more money because you have a credit card. You can just manage the money you already have better, hopefully, if you use it properly. But no, you're not wealthy just because you got a new credit card. And then the credit report. So this one, again, people sometimes get confused. You're not turning in your credit report. I do not want your credit report. In fact, after you read your credit report, probably do it electronically. Make sure you delete it. I mean, and if you print it out, make sure you shred it, burn it, or whatever. But make sure you can access your credit report and take a look at it. If you're a typical college student, it's not going to be very interesting. There's not going to be a whole lot to it. But you're not looking for it to be interesting reading. You want a whole bunch of things that just say, paid in full or just no real comment. They don't. If they're writing verbiage, if there's a paragraph in your credit report, yeah, you've got an issue. And then the problem here on Chapter 8, page 229, problem 6. So anyway, I'll put that video out there. It's this video for comment. It's a little longer than the other, but I'm trying to research a little bit to see who the authors of this thing were, and I couldn't quite track it down. So I don't know what their political views are on other situations. I hope I'm not being affiliated with some, extremist group on any side. But what they're saying about the credit cards and the history is kind of interesting. And then one other thing I'll put out there, and this is a longer video, and again, this is completely optional, but there's some guys who in personal finance, in a lot of the books and educational stuff you see on personal finance, these guys are so focused on austerity and how to, your money supply is fixed and how you're going to get the most out of it. And these guys kind of make the point, number one, Raul, this one guy, he kind of makes the point of the bigger picture about life and what you're really trying to accomplish other than, greed. And then one of the other guys makes the point about maybe a better solution is to, get involved in the line of work that's going to perhaps pay you a little bit more if that's what's important to you is the money, and how to, maybe do something on the side. And I don't mean purely out of money to work yourself to death, but I mean something that might be more enjoyable. For me, given a choice between spending a couple hours a week on a budget plan, or spending a couple hours a week making money somewhere else, so I don't have to budget as tightly. I guess you could do both, but anyway, it's all about trying to get the pie a little bit bigger rather than the size of the slices. So I've hit that analogy pretty hard already, I think. All right, till next week.